Baruch Haba B'Shem Birkas Hatorah. I'd like to welcome the ganze Olam to today's shir. Today's shir was sponsored by Avraham Spry, AB Plumbing, and we give him a big yashikoyach for sponsoring many shiurim. Now we have the cover to have Rabbi Smith Shlita.
A young man was married and he woke up a little late that morning and he was on the way to davening like about 9:15 and the shver drove by. He says, "You're going to Chol? Happen? I'll take you to Chol." He decided he's going to lie b'shev al tasa, he'll make he's going to Chol. And then the shver started telling him a nice shtickle chiddush. And he was faced with two shilas. Number one, is he allowed to listen to the Torah because it's before Birkas Hatorah? And number two, he has to say something smart, otherwise it's not me when he's ungefragt. Are you allowed to say something, learn before Birkas Hatorah? In other words, we're going to talk about the sugya of Birkas Hatorah, and specifically, is there an issa to learn before Birkas Hatorah? In other words, you have to say it, and it's a mitzvah deraisa and all that. But when it comes to a situation that one is unable to say it, he can't say Birkas Hatorah at 9:15, and he's really in trouble. And the embassy will have a host of shilas, and of course we'll get to the common shvuas morning shaila when the person that comes to yeshiva who's supposed to make the Birkas Hatorah for the Olam is late, and it starts a whole vikuach. You're not allowed to learn. You're allowed to learn. People love a mitzvah to eat and a veira to learn. And so this morning it had, that type of situation. It's already a lois. Is there an issa to learn? Is it just a maila? So I want to learn that sugi bez Hashem with many nafkaminas, and we'll touch upon other yisoidis in Hilchas Birkas Hatorah. So the embassy is, it's not so hard to believe that if there's a chiyuv to say Birkas Hatorah, then maybe you're not allowed to learn. Zeichel Ladava, there's a pasuk in the Torah that when a person's a makam mitunif, a place that's not clean al pi Torah, if it's a chesaron of haya machanecha kadosh, you're not allowed to learn. Even if it means not learning for many hours. The Greiser Rishayim, the Greiser Amrutmerg was in jail, and he was unable to learn because it was an unclean place. So maybe we'll say, if you're not allowed to learn, even a little bit di'evet, when it's a dirty area, maybe you're not allowed to learn without Birkas Hatorah. But ef shefakert, because there it says a pasuk in the Torah. Where do you find a pasuk that there's an issa to learn before Birkas Hatorah? Maybe it's a mitzvah, maybe Hayy L'chudei. So the emphasis is, we have to try to find if there's any precedent in halacha, something like this, where there's a bracha, and without the bracha, there's an issa. So what comes to mind is the famous Gemara in Brachas Lamed Hey. Gemara says it's asa to be nena ma'il mazev olei bracha v'chol nena ma'il mazev bracha ki'ilu ma'al. There we see that it's not just a chiyah bracha, but it's actually an issa to eat before the bracha. But the emphasis is that is fundamentally different, as I'll explain. First of all, that's a Gemara. You have a Gemara that says you're not allowed to eat before brachas. But do you have a Gemara you're not allowed to learn before Birkas Hatorah? But more than that, and that's really the yisod you have to understand. Do you ever wonder, but in Einain, before the Kfura, it's a very unusual situation. An Einain is not allowed to make a bracha, you're not allowed to bench. He eats without brachas, he doesn't bench. Is he allowed to go to McDonald's and say, listen, and today I'm allowed to taste tarfis? Chas v'shalom. Why? What's the chiluk? Because he's not mechuyev mitzvahs, but isurim he's mechuyev. So here the kasha is, how could an oinen eat without a bracha rishayna? Naniach, there's no chiyuv, there's no mitzvah, because in oinen, but l'char is an issa l'hana b'loi bracha. So als that should be mechuyev to make a bracha. The teretz is that members can make the kasha bigger. Safik brachas lahakol. How could you say that? Naniach, there's no chiyah brachas, it's a safik. But why is there an issa to have a nabalai bracha? It's a safik issa. So the emphasis, I'm not telling you chedushim, you probably know this. There's a famous shita of the Marshal Pesachim Kuv Beis, the Kivegim brachas and Yudbeis Sechen Tetzu. That in the Chanami, safik brachas lahakol means that he has to make a bracha. Because he can't eat with the loy bracha. But we paskin, Shulchan Aruch, a few places, Safek brachas lahakol means he has to eat without a bracha. But kana ben shoyel, if there's an issa b'loy bracha, so als the issa sheba, he should be able to eat. The teretz to both kashas, the oinen and the Safek brachas, is And avad is an issa to eat b'loi bracha. That's a product, that's a teitzah of the chiyah bracha. If you tell me an oyin is not mechuyev to make a birkas hanenin, so if there's no chiyah, there's no issa. If you tell me chazal paskin safek brachas the hakol as the chayim of loy sisa, so there's no chiyah bracha. So if there's no chiyah bracha, there's no issa. So here we see already a ray of hope. If we're going to paskin that there's no chiyah birkas hatorah, so, or a safek, or whatever the case is, so maybe tak it's not so awesome to learn. Maybe the issa is a teitzah of the chiyuv, and if there's no chiyuv, L'mashal Shavuos morning is a safek, maybe it's nishkeferlich. And so this is our question, how do we go from here? So the emphasis is, let's think a little more practically. We have three different types of brachas that we're zeicha to say. A birkas hanenin, a birkas hamitzvah, and a birkas haidah. Let's look what we find there, and then we can apply it to our question. Let's talk about a birkas hamitzvah. You put on tefillin, you make a bracha. You blow shofar, you make a bracha. But do we find an issa to do a mitzvah b'loi bracha? Perhaps. I'll tell you interesting marshal. The Tshuvas marshal Simon Samaches. The Taz and Tofrei Samaches quotes him. The marshal has a novel question. Why don't we ever find that we make an early Shmini Atzeres? Pesach you can't make, and Sukkot you can't make, because it's at Laila. Shmini Atzeres, there's no particular mitzvah that's totally in Laila. Why don't you make an early Shmini Atzeres? So up to Mashal, you really could, Ikadadin. But when you come to the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, which is really Hoshana Rabbah, because it's still Mibayid Yoim, you're going to have a suffix if you make a Elisha Sukkah. Because really, Shmini Atzeres, Gemara Smi Pasuk, you sit in the Sukkah without a bracha. Hoshana Rabbah, you make a bracha. But you're Nishti Nishtaher. You are really making Shmini Atzeres, but it's really Hoshana Rabbah. To make a Elisha Sukkah seems the proper thing to do, because it's still Mibayid Yoim. But then again, if you make Shmini Atzeres, and you're going to say Chag Shmini Atzeres Hazeh, and then you're going to make a Leishev, that's a Stima Neyubei. So what would we say? No, don't make a Leishev Sukkah, Sukkah the Marshal, but it's an Avoin Godoil, do a mitzvah without a bracha. So how do you have the right to put yourself in the matziv to make an early Shmini Atzeres and rely on Savik Brachas L'Hakol? Avoin Godoil. No. So we see an insight when it comes to Birkas HaMitzvahs. Even though we are quick to say brachas lav ma'akvos, true, but you don't varf sich mit a bracha and say don't make it. But that's only when by Birkas HaMitzvahs. Who said that Birkas Hatorah is Birkas HaMitzvahs? The answer is we say it. Lasoik b'divrei soira. In fact, there's a beautiful yisoid of the Chayodam, Nishmas Adam. The Chayodam says, where did Chazal get the jurisdiction to Mesakin Birkas HaMitzvahs? Who gave them the rights to say that? What was their source in Halacha? He says they sourced a pasuk in the Torah. Because Vivayit Birkas HaTorah is a deraisa, and Birkas HaTorah is a Birkas HaMitzvah. So Chazal said, if you make a bracha on Torah, so midaboni make a bracha on Lulav. So Birkas HaTorah is definitely a Birkas HaMitzvah. So it would be an Avain Gadol to a mitzvah b'loi bracha. But then again, let's think practically. How many times when you learn Hilchas Tfilas Kelim is halacha toivel b'loi bracha? How many times in other areas of halacha, even Amol, you have a Til Shadayim, a Kazayis, the bracha, you make a Tfil b'loi bracha, and a Til b'loi bracha. If you have a good reason not to make the bracha, then we go back to Safik Brachas L'Hakol. So maybe we'll say Birkas HaTorah also. Avad it's a Birkas HaMitzvah. But you have a suffix, what you do? Maybe taka, there's no oven gadol to learn without a bracha. So that's one you say. Birkas HaMitzvah, we did already. How about Birkas HaNenin? So Birkas HaNenin is a Gemara. Also Hanet b'lei bracha, right? But what happens when you have a suffix brachas? What do we paskin? Eat b'lei bracha. So why can we say Birkas HaTorah is a Birkas HaNenin? And the emphasis, it is a Birkas HaNenin. The Rav Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchas in Siman Mem Zayin, you have to make a bracha on Torah like you make a bracha on Kol HaNoya Sheba'olam, Yosin Kol HaNoya Sheba'olam. We're coming close to Shavuos. The famous Arein Avram in Ahara Masech Nedarim that Torah we say mitzvah lahanas nitnu, And don't think it's just am gesagt. The Ktsois HaChoshen has the following psak halacha. Imagine you need a rashba, and you borrow a rashba from your friend, and you took it and you were careful with it, and it got stolen. I don't know who stole the rashba, but the rashba is stolen. Do you have to pay? So any child knows shoyel is chayiv and genev aveda. Zok the Ktsois HaChoshen, why is shoyel chayiv in genev aveda? Because kol hana shaloi. But zok the Ktsois, when it comes to limud haTorah, mitzvah lav lahanis nitnu, therefore it's not kol hana shaloi. There's no hana because mitzvah lav lahanis nitnu. Tainit in the sivis, and this is all in Siman Ayin Beis. It's not true because Torah is lahanis nitnu. So you're a regular shoyel with hana. If it's a shoyel with hana, you have to pay. So it comes out if you lose someone's sefer that you borrowed, it's machlokes gedoylei achrayim. Ktsois and nesivis. If lemaisa, we're going to say a potter. But at the end of the day, it's very mistavra, v'arevna, and that the Welt says, is a Birkas Hanenin. So once we have a Birkas Hanenin, we could say the same thing. Avada, you shouldn't learn without a bracha. But what happens when it comes lemaisa? Maybe you're allowed to learn.
But you don't have to make a moitzi on matzah, on the mitzvah Shabbat. Because lav lehen is the...
First, by achil, we do say lahen is it, no. Okay, I'll talk after. I want to try to keep the time. I want to make sure we fit everything in. But Lamaisa, this is the second Yesod. And the most simple to understand would be the third Yesod. And that is, the Gemara says that if a person, which is the main bracha, Birkas Hatorah, is like the Gemara, the Asher Bracha Banu. Why? So Gemara's lashon is Me'ula Sheba Brachis. So Rashi explains what makes Birkas Hatorah Me'ula Sheba Brachis, because it has the Haidah of the Torah, the Rebbeinu Shalom, and Klal Yisrael. So it's like a bracha mishuleshes of all three Shevach. Yisrael, Barayis, Kuchabrichu is in the bracha Asher Bracha Banu. What is the nature of Birchais Haidah? So we know that from everyday living. A person, Midina Gemara, you put on your shoes, you make a bracha Shalikot Tzarki, right? Tisha B'Av, the Goyen holds, if you don't wear shoes, you don't make a bracha. But what is the minig Yisrael? We don't make a bracha right away when we step on the ground or we open our eyes. Birchas Haidah has a unique feature. You can make it whenever you want. Avad lechatchila, you can make it at the right time, but who could do it? Today you wake up, go to the bathroom until you get it. So people could push your Birchas Hatorah for a long time. You're enjoying your shoes, you're enjoying your eyes. The teretz is Birchas Haidah is a mitzvah once a day. The bracha, the mitzvah is once a day. So say it whenever you want. And that's why Minig Ha'olam is the Loi Kagra, we make it Tisha B'Av. And make it Yom Kippur. Because it's a once a day Shevach. Once we assume it's a Birch, that if we assume Birchas HaTorah is a Birchas Haidah, like the Gemara seems to imply, the Me'ula Sheba Brachas is Haidah for the Torah, Klal Yisrael, and the B'er Olam, so we're pretty relaxed. Let's say the Alois comes and no one's around. Okay. So you'll make it later. It's no different just like Kotzarki. So it comes out from all the reasons, that all the three identities of Birchas HaTorah, whether it's Birchas HaMitzvahs, Birchas HaNenin, or Birchas Haidah, is nishkefelach if you learn without Birchas HaTorah. Now why do I say nishkefelach? Because you're all probably thinking that don't we know it's a Beferish Gemara, that not only is it wrong to learn without Birchas HaTorah, but that was the Churban Abayis. Who doesn't know the Gemara in the Dar and Pei Aleph? No one knew, the Chachamim, the Nevi'im, Macher Sharas didn't know. Why was there a Churban Abayis? Until Bari Olam had to tell the secret. That means there was such a Dar day, such a perfect Dar. No one could identify any problem. And what was the reason? The famous Gemara, they didn't make Birchas HaTorah. But you look at the lashon of the Gemara, as the Ran explains, Avada Oiskim Hayu Tamid in Torah. They will learn Tamid, Halavayav uns gesagt. But they didn't, they were Malayim Avarachim B'Torah Tchila. Zok the Dibber Chamudais in Brachas Pergalov Ois Ayin Tes. The lashon Gemara is like Birch B'Torah Tchila means they did say Birchas HaTorah. If it's one of the Taryag mitzvahs, they did it. But they didn't say it right away. They learned for half hour, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then they said it. Maybe they held it once a day. But Zok the Dibber Chamudais, That means the Gemara's Megala, the Churban Abayis came because they learned Tamid. And they said Birkas Hatorah. But if you don't say it before you learn, that's a gewaldige lack of Chashivas Hatorah and Almeh of the Aretz on that itself. So why are we playing games with saying Sforis? The Gemara says the Churban Abayis who said that. The answer is 100% true. But that's when a person is able to do it. Let's say it's a Shavuos morning, and there's an Olam, if he wants B'nai Torah, and he's coming in 2 minutes. So we won't learn for 2 minutes. 2 minutes is a yam of time. Even for a simple person, 2 minutes is Yesh Chanalamba in a moment of Torah. But for an Olam, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. So maybe Avad they have to do it. They in the times of that Churban Abayis, they just did it for no reason. But let's say you have a reason that you can't make Birkas Hatorah. Let's say someone is stuck in a hospital, his wife's having a baby, we'll soon see these type of shilas, and there's no one to be mitzi him, and it's already after our lives. What should he do? So Bittul Torah is an option? Wer sagt? So that's why we could say both are true. Avad Yavsei Lechatchila right away, and let me be clear once and for all. No doubt about it. Klal Aleph is like Berchu B'Torah Tchila, we say Birkas Torah right away, and don't play games. Don't make kunsim. But let's say there's a reason to delay. Maybe we have a heta, because it's like Birkas HaMitzvahs, it's like Birkas HaNanin, it's like Birkas Haidah. If you can't do it, you're allowed to learn without Torah. However, there's one more hurdle we have to overcome. And that is, Rabbi Chanan is quoted by his Mechutin in Sefer of the Kovner Rav, the Tshuvas Dvar Avram, Chelik Aleph Siman Tezayin. And Rabbi Chanan, again, it's not in Rabbi Chanan, but it's quoted by the Kovner Rav, his Mechutin, that Ken Zayin, there is a Mefurish Makar, that there's an Issa, Mamish, of learning before Birkas Hatorah. It'll be something similar, like in a Makam She'einai Naki. What's Rabbi Chanan's Yisoid? So Rabbi Chanan said Azoid. The Mish says in Brachas that we all learn, this is Taf Tezvav, Cheresh HaMedaber Ve'einai Shemeya Lo Yitraim. He shouldn't take off Truma. Ve'im Taram, Truma say Truma. Now, what's wrong with the Cheresh? As I find Yid. So Rashi explains, because he can't make a bracha, and we don't do a mitzvah below bracha. So why taka is imtarim truma say truma? If you tell me you can't make a bracha, it's a problem. So adrabah. So why but the evidence is good? So zok the Gemara, because brachas and ma'akiv, brachas only do abanan, and therefore nishkeferlach if he does truma without a bracha. Zok the Rosh, and the Rosh is quoted in the bracha Mishalesh Masech the brachas on that Gemara. Aval ihavian deraisa. If lo yitzah birchas hamitzvah would be a deraisa, if the bracha on Truma would be a chi of deraisa, then it would be ma'akvos. Why? Because you didn't do a mitzvah deraisa. Sokta b'chanan oy bazoi. If we will hold that birchas haTorah is a deraisa, so we found a situation that a bracha deraisa is ma'akiv. So it would be like Truma, lo yitzah birchas Truma v'yadaraisa. And Zok Rabbi Chanan, and this is what he quotes Rabbi Chanan, that oy bazoi, if you go with the shitas, which there are many shitas azoi that birchas Torah is deraisa, it would be an issa to learn before birchas haTorah. It's a package deal. Bracha deraisa, mitzvah deraisa. Zok Rabbi Chanan, v'zeh davar chadash shelo shamanu. He conceded that it's a chiddush, but this is what he quotes Rabbi Chanan. If you ever hear B'Shem Rabbi Chanan, this is the source. Pesach, Frank, quoted in Mincha Shloimeh Chelik Aleph Siman Tzadik Aleph, came to the same conclusion with the same raya. Both are mechaber. But the emes is, I'll tell you, it's a bigger chiddush. The Tzel Merav, one of the Gedolim that really brought kashrus and many things to America in the mid-1900s, in his Tshuva Migdalos Merkachim, Siman Hay, he has a shaila which lied is negeya. People wake up a half a minute before this man says man Krishma, and they want to know, could they chapra Krishma? Now, what's the problem? They don't wonder about saying Krishma in pajamas. That doesn't bother them. But they're worrying about, they didn't say Birkas HaTorah yet. So Zok Titzel Merav, if you say Birkas HaTorah, if you say Krishma before Birkas HaTorah, it's a mitzvah b'aveira. Because Krishma, besides being Krishma, is also Torah. So he says, how could you say Krishma and B'yaitza? It's a Birkas Haveira. Now, of course, he knows what we know, that it has to be Haguf Haveira, and he proves that in such a scenario, if you don't make a bracha that's matir the limud, it's a mitzvah Haveira, and don't bother with the Krishma. So it garnish vert. Okay, we'll soon see that's the Das Yachid. But definitely we see to our Inyan, it brings it a little more to perspective. The Birkas Hatorah is a matir for Torah. Like a shakel is matir for the cup of coffee. And on a matir, Talmud is Essen. And maybe without a matir, you can't learn. Reb Shlomo Kluger, in Elef HaShloime, I'm just telling you, you can look it up and you can see what you want to say. But this is what he says in the Tshuva Siman Shin Chaf Aleph. If a person ate matzah without the Birkas Hamoed, for some reason, Eina Yoytzei Chayvosai. Because the eating was be'issa, because he ate beloy Birkas Hanenin, and a mitzvah b'aveir. That's how weit a bracha could be makav the mitzvah. Now, you notice he didn't say that if he didn't say alechilas matzah, because we know Birkas HaMitzvah not makiv. But if you could tell me that if without a moitzi, you're not yoytzi the mitzvah of matzah, it's certainly plausible that without Birkas HaTorah, it's a mitzvah of the same sort. Now, this, however, as you could understand, the Etzem Rabbi Chanan, that Rabbi Chanan says Chiddush Lo Shemanu is true. But here the question is that Lamaisa, we do see in practice on Kapanim that sometimes we are mekel. And let's start with what's the given. The given is that, which is a tumul in Shulchan Aruch and the Rishonim in Siman Memvav and Archayim. The minig used to be, and you look at their mother, that was the minig, that they came to shul slichas morning, they said slichas, and then when they finished, they made Birkas Hatorah. So all the Rishonim wondering, slichas is full of psukim. So the Ramah, Kedarkev, defends the minig Yisrael, you're saying it als tefillah, but there we see already a start that it's not ma'akiv in the mitzvah if you don't make Birkas Hatorah. But it's more than that. Avada, and again, I'm stressing again, Avada and Avada 100 times over, we don't learn without Birkas Hatorah. That's the Gemara Nedarim. In fact, the Mishnah Berurah learns up the Mechaba, right in the beginning, Birchter Tzarech Lizah Mamoed, Shlei Lilmoid At Shivarech, and then he quotes the Gemara Nedarim. And that's point number one. But point number two is that enough of a svara to tell you better don't learn than learning without Birkas Hatorah? Are you sure about that? Rav Shlomo Hayman once said, "Tzvamachen agmar, dafechaban agmar." He's talking about a certain minig Yisrael not to learn. He goes, I don't have that minig because by me to close the Gemara you have to have a Gemara. Tell me a Gemara. In Shulchan Aruch in Shas there is no mention of electricity because they didn't have electricity, right? But they had Birkas Hatorah. There's 14 sifrim in Siman Mem Zayin, all about various Birkas Hatorah questions. Why don't we find this also to learn about Birkas Hatorah? It's Negeya. They probably also woke up late in those days, no? They probably also had a Shavuos morning, no? All these fakers we have, they had also. Why don't we say Allah, it's also to Lilmite? So we could say, Iboy Yis'ei Makra, Iboy Yis'ei Masvar. First of all, and this is the Taina the Dvar Havram, and that Tshuva, where he argues Rabbi Chanan. He says, if you would show me a pasuk in Parshas Azinu, Kishem Hashem Ekra Havagoy Lekeinu was going on the mitzvah of Birkas Hatorah, and afterwards Vagis Vayom and Valayla, the Torah made a package deal. No, I could understand Habalei Halai Sagi, but Birkas Hatorah is Kishem Hashem Ekra. Limud HaTorah is other psukim. Fagerti is the whole the Goyim's brother has a common Makairis, but it's not in the pasuk Kishem Hashem Ekra. So it's two different places in the Torah. Who gives you the right to make a yesod that one is telling the other? Vezapt. My shaita the zul is umakav. Ilu haya in one pasuk, you could say you didn't do it, so you're missing the package. The Ramshik in Archayim Siman Chavtes, he says even more prush. He says, so when someone doesn't say Birkas Hatorah, so tell him, you're not don't learn. Bad enough he's mevatel one mitzvah, so he should do two yisurim. What is it? Misha yachz shum yoichav yoichashum, yachz yoichashum. But the point is, we don't find any place in Torah that is connected. So besides, it's not in Shas and Shulchan Aruch, but even in the pasuk. The raya from Truma. So if you look at the Bnei Yeshua, the Maschal Aval, you see it's only a Havamina. So that's like a shtickle of a Pel or a Bachanan. But whatever the case is, we could say the following. Again, I'm always stressed this because this is the emes. Klal number one is like Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchil is Churban. But if it comes to that, a person has no Birkas Hatorah, he's stuck in a hospital, it's after Allah, he has the same stuff that we have on Shavuos morning, tell him to just not to learn, Vezakt. And this Grada, Rav Sternbuch in Chelik Dalet, on Betov Chaf Aleph, quotes Abu Chaim, and I quote the Lashon, and he says, Birkas Hatorah hi mitzvah ve'ein issa lilmaid koyt m'shivarich. In Chelik Hey, Simon Kuf Samach, he quotes a Meister, Bel Yebarach, that was a Bel Yebarach, the Rav of Mir, Bel Kamai. He once came to Brisk early morning. I don't know the whole story, but this is what he writes there. And of course, they all came out to greet him. Chaim came to greet him. The Telzer Shiva came to greet him. And they started talking Torah. What did the Talmidei Chacham do? They started talking Torah. And Rabbi Yebarach said, I'm sorry, I can't listen. I didn't see Birkas Hatorah yet. So Rabbi Chaim told him that there's nothing wrong. Ein issa l'limud Birkas Hatorah. And Abitzel Aponovich, who was also there, Abitzel Aponovich told Moshe, what's the problem? So go do a mitzvah later, but let's listen to the Chiddush. So you have Gedolei Olam that said point blank, there's no issa of learning before Birkas Hatorah. The Mincha Shloima Zalman Shuv that I mentioned, after his Doicha B'tzei Pesach's Chiddush, based on the Mishnah, he says, Lamaisa, the fact is that we don't find any place there's an issa to learn, b'di'evet we'll call it, b'shas hatchak, without Birkas Hatorah. Rabbi Yashiv in Kovetz Tshuvos Chelik Aleph Siman Tes, he says, if you can't make Birkas Hatorah, ein issa olav to be mevatel Torah, adarabba, if you can't do Birkas Hatorah, at least learn. I found more of a list. You want to see a nice discussion, the B'tzei Chacham Chelik Aleph Siman Aleph, when he discusses the shayla that we mentioned earlier about person woke up late and is a minute to this man, Krishma, and if he says Birkas Hatorah, he's going to miss this man. He says there, and the tikkun in the back, he says le'matzinu b'shum makom she'asa lilmoid b'loy Birkas Hatorah. Now Rabbi say, lo re'inu ain't a raya, but in halacha it is a raya. Agan shas, agan shulchan aruch, t'shtakar nemes. Now again, the Gemara in the Dharma is not a stimunate klal l'klal. That's talking about when a person has the option. But to tell Yid or Yidden or people in yeshiva to wait till the fellow comes to make Birkas Hatorah, who takes on his place is such a psak. Now, Lamaisa, so the Yizar Ma'oid and Tchila and Oven Gadol are all true. But Lamaisa, as we said, it's not enough to say that when someone can't make a bracha, that he should stop learning. Now let's apply it more specifically. Let's begin with the shal that we began with. This Shver is telling him a shtickle Torah, and the Eid and Nebuch didn't make Birkas Hatorah yet. That's what you call a Shver Shayla, verstehst? So Lamaisa, in this case, he was defending himself because he was only being Mahara b'Torah. And at least you have a Machaba, the Hira b'Torah is Mutta without Birkas Hatorah. But he made a mistake. Because the Halachas Ketanas, one of the Kadmoinim in Chelik Beis Kufnun Tes, he has this Shayla. If I'm telling you a Chiddush, and you are prior to Birkas Hatorah, so Zakti Halachas Ketanes, don't say that's only Hira. Because even the Ogur that holds Hira is not Mechuyev in Limud in Birkas Hatorah, but when there's a Shemaya Ka'oina going on, that makes it into a Diba. Now, he doesn't mean you have to have a Din Shemaya Ka'oina with Kavano Lotzes and Bar Chiyuva, if a cut and talk tells you, he means to say that the P'tur of the Ogur is when it's a Trukana Hira. Once there's a Dibur to Misyachas to, a Dibur is a Dibur. So this is what Allah Ketanis says, and all the Achrayim follow. We'll soon see. Rabbi Shlomo Kluger has a Chiddush, but we'll get to that. But he says the Yisoid Adavar is that the P'tur of Hira, that the Goyin didn't agree to, but at least the Mechab agreed to that, that's only on a pure Hira. Once there is a Cheftza of Dibur out there, whether it's you or someone else, you're Chayiv in Birkas Hatorah. So that doesn't work. So what should he do? So again, if he feels that it's mamish bezoyin and shalom bayis and so he's like we said, if you can't do it, you can't do it. I would have thought that let him tell Shver, I'm sorry, I'm late. This won't happen again. So maybe the bush will be mechap and also straighten him out. But anyhow, if he felt that he doesn't want to do it, we can't say it's wrong. He could rely that even you're allowed to learn in such a situation for Birkas Hatorah. Kolsh game when it's a Shemaya Ka'oina, again, it's not the end of the world. But again, it has to be taken more serious than he was taking it, because what he's doing now is the Sib of the Churban Abayis. So you're embarrassed, so let the kapara be the bezyonis. But again, in halacha, if he asked the question, he would be correct that he doesn't have to say anything. Another question which I'd like to talk about is the one that I just mentioned, that when someone woke up, when someone came to shul, someone asked me the shayla, and he came to shul for his daf yomi, whatever the shir was, and he was late. And he didn't say Birkas Hatorah yet. So he said, if I'm going to start saying Birkas Hatorah, I'm going to miss the trend of it, the train of thought, I don't want to miss it. So he decided to push it off till after davening. That's wrong. Because your cheshbon, you push off Birkas Hatorah till the end of a shir to learn the chatchila because your cheshbon is. I said, maybe the schus of Birkas Hatorah, you would understand the shir better. Don't forget, the tzlach, in the end of brachas, one is why we call Masech the brachas. Masech the brachas sounds like Hilchas brachas, but Hilchas brachas begins in the 6th parak. It's Krishma and everything else. Why Masech the brachas? The bulk of the Masechta is Hilchas Tefillah, Hilchas Krishma, Zok Titzlach, the Noid Yehuda. You're starting Shas, you want to remember Shas? He says it's a skula to say Birkas Hatorah b'kavana that you can remember the learning that you do. So Chazal called it brachas not because of Birkas Hanenin, case of Mevarchim. They called it brachas because the Yisoid of Atzlacha is Birkas Hatorah. Now today people love skulas, but this is legitimate. Yehuda says that a school to remember your learning is Birkas Hatorah. So why should he give it up? See, it's a question of you have to have a mishkal chasidus, like Mr. Sharm calls, to know what's more important. So to say I'm going to learn in the next few minutes or next hour, whatever it is, and I'll rely on saying it later, that's like Baruch B'Torah Tchila. Another case that's kedai to mention, and that is the girls today learn quite a lot. But I think the minig is, I don't know if the minig is the right word, they say Birkas Hatorah in school. But let's say they have a test, and I guess like boys, they study for the test, and the test is in Chomish or whatever they're learning. They have to be told that if they're learning before Birkas Hatorah, it's the same halacha like men. That if they decide they're going to study for their test before Birkas Hatorah, they say Birkas Hatorah. You'll say, but Nashim Apata from Limud HaTorah, even in America, right? It's B'neichem v'loi b'nei seichem. But Zakta Mechaba, the end of Mem Zayin, Nashim Mevarcha is Birkas Hatorah. And don't forget, the Mechaba was a Sfardi. And the Sfardish Nashim did make a bracha on Shaifa, Lulav, and all the Zman Gramas. So why the Mechaba say on Torah they do make? The teretz is, there are different shatim, but one of the main terutzim is because they're mechuyev to learn that what's negated to them. So if, for us, learning with Birkas Hatorah is a gewalt of a chesaron, almost ma'akeh, but close to that, why are Nashim different? And I should mention, if you have a son, he's under bar mitzvah and he davens in school, and today he's starting his first vaher, it's a good opportunity to mechanech him. Mein Kind, we don't learn for Birkas Hatorah. Usually you say it in school, yeshiva, and it's a good idea. Maybe you should tell your Rebbe, maybe you should ask the Rebbe first. You have to make sure the Rebbe is on the same page with you. But for a boy or girl to learn about Birkas Hatorah, even ketanim, if that's the halacha, why not do it? Question. Someone has a friar relative for the Seder. Okay, typical question, or for Yom Tov, whatever, even during the week. And he wants to share the Heilig Torah with him. But you could be certain that this friar person did not say Birkas Hatorah. So are you giving him a schus, or are you feeding him with lifnei iva? Don't forget to give this chiloni to eat without a bracha. The Ramah says, is lifnei iva. So maybe to give him to learn without Birkas Hatorah is also lifnei iva. The teretz is enechanami. If you go with the shita that is an issa to learn, like it's an issa to eat without brachas, then enechanami. But since, as we showed, that la'alacha, when there's a good reason, a very good reason, then there's no issa to learn, then enechanami. This would be a good example. Now, avada, what you could do is, you could say, if it's the morning, you say, I'm going to make the blessing and I'll include you. If it's the afternoon, you could also realize one of your tafkidim is kol yisrael reivim zeh lezeh, and you say, I'm going to make a blessing on Torah, and I'll include you. And even though you made the brach in the morning, but this is a regular Birkas HaMitzvah, that you're allowed to make it a second time. But here's what I want to make a point. When they come, it's often a very delicate situation. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be looked down to, and you tell them, got to make a blessing. If there's a chance you might lose them, then don't play around with success. They want to hear, tell them a chiddush, Tell him a nice word and rely on the ikad din. But if you're going to tell them brachas and implying that there's something missing with them, maybe you have to schar b'efseidim. I mean, this is very negeya. In Eretz Yisrael, you get into a monit in a taxi, and usually you have someone that's is showing interest, whatever it is, and you tell them a nice thought. You never know. The pintel yid can be ignited with that thought. But you start saying, "Wait, I can't tell you until you make a blessing." He says, "You know what? I'm not interested." You're getting too down his back. He doesn't want that. But at least be aside, we could say that when it's shaykh to be moitzi them, I mean, what do people do? They speak kirv v'chaykim. They speak to hundreds of people, irreligious people. How many percent said Birkas Hatorah? Also, there you can make a text out of it because it's a big crowd. And, everybody has an opening speech, whatever. You can make it into publicly, but be aside if you're going to lose them, if you're insulting them, and you're going to ruin the relationship, especially if it's a relative that finally came and, they're interested in the Shulchan Aruch more than the whole of the rest of the Seder. So, not the Shulchan Aruch book, I'm talking about them. I'm talking about the Suda. So you can start telling them to make a bracha, you might just turn them off. So again, a person has to have seichel. Another very important question is what I mentioned earlier, that a person woke up right before the Zman. So again, I want to make a point, a Ben Torah should never say Krishma the last minute, because probably he is not dressed properly in pajamas with his shluf kapel. Is not Hol Malchus Shamayim. They say the Brisker Rav once said he didn't like those that make a Krishma b'tanai, because you can't be makabel Hol Malchus Shamayim b'tanai. First time I'm makabel you, I'm not sure. We'll see. And how about with pajamas? So obviously you have to wake up earlier and say Birkas Hatorah and say Krishma like a mensch. But let's say it's mamish, this or nothing. So we did see the Tzelem Rav's Shita, Avada, that he held its mitzvah of Erev. But then again, as we understand that most poskim hold there's no Issa. Besides the fact that there's no Issa learning of Birkas Hatorah, but there's specifically in Krishma, we could say Krishma, and Bemis the Mechaber says such a thing, because the Mechaber says that a person that he wants to be Yoitza with Avarabba has to learn right after davening, so the Avarabba kicks in. So the Gedolei Achronim ask, he has to learn? I did learn. I said Krishma. Krishma is Torah, right? The Torah says could be if Krishma is done l'Shem Mitzvah, it doesn't have a Shem Torah. And this Bemis is Yesoid. The Chazon Ish said it a few times. This is quoted in the Chaim Kanievsky's new Choshev Sefer that he wrote, Taka, the Kunchis Zachroinos, in Perek Lamegimel Siman Vav. And Chaim said what he heard from the Chazon Ish many times. The Chazon Ish had different rayas. One of them was this question of Krishma before Birkas Hatorah. But Chazon Ish also said it in the famous Gemara in Megillah, where the Gemara says in Megillah, right in the beginning, Mavatan Talmud Torah from Mikra Megillah. So everybody asks the Kasha, Mavatan Talmud Torah from Mikra Megillah. Well, Megillah is Bittul Torah, it's a Lashon Hara. Why is it Bittul Torah? So the Chazon Ish said to Yisoid, when a person does an action, it only has one identity. You want it to be Megillah, but it's not Limud HaTorah. Limud HaTorah, it's not Megillah. And Chazon Ish explains that's shot in the Mechaber that you want to be Yoitza learning right after Avarabba. It has to be a Limud HaTorah. Krishma is a mitzvah. Now this Chazon Ish is a big chiddush Avada, but Chazon Ish said it. So that would fit in here as well. Could be a person, besides the fact that if he doesn't do it now, he's finished, he lost his man. But also, like the Chazon Ish's Yisoid, you could label this as a mitzvah. A mitzvah doesn't need Birkas Hatorah. That's what the Chazon Ish officially said. Now, Lamaisa, we find this taka, l'chayr, that's the Ramah's pshat. The Ramah says people used to daven and say, the ganze slichos before Birkas Hatorah. Ayis psukim. Torah says, once you're giving it a label of tefillah, maybe it's not the mitzvah Limud HaTorah. So that would definitely be one option in this case. But no doubt about it, Avada, the best way to do it is to get up on time, get up properly. What if Shaykh, I would say, and a person has an extra moment, and don't rush Birkas Hatorah either, he should say at least the bracha of Asher Bach Habanu, then say Krishma, and then say the other two brachas. I will ask, how do I know that you're allowed to change the order? So that's a Mechaber. Mechaber in Kuf Lamed Tes, Sif Tes, says when someone's called up to an aliyah before Birkas Hatorah. So what does he do? Mechaber says he makes the regular brachas, and after he finishes, when he goes back to his seat, and no one should know because he's embarrassed that he didn't say Birkas Hatorah, he had to hold him out laning, then he said the other two brachas. So you see clear from the Mechaba that you can make Asher Bracha Banu first, and the other two brachas later. What's a little more challenging, a person comes into shul late, and of course when a person's late, it's always challenging, and he came dreadfully late, and the holding by Kriyas HaTorah. So here we have a problem, because Kriyas HaTorah, you can't spalt it and say it's not the Limud HaTorah, it's Kriyas HaTorah. Kriyas HaTorah is Limud HaTorah. It's not like Krishma, you can make it into a mitzvah, but not in Limud HaTorah. So here we have a problem, but to walk out is a bigger problem. That's Mechab and Shulchan Aruch, Kuf Mem Aleph in the beginning, Kuf Mem Vav in the beginning. Oiz v'Hashem yichlu. You're not allowed to walk out from Beis Medrash when they're laning. So here we have a little of an issue here. You'll say, I'm just listening, and it's only Hirur, and I'll rely on the Mechab B'Shita. That seems to be wrong. Because as we said earlier from the Halachas Ketanois, that when you're listening, when you hear Sa'adiba being said, it's more than Hirur. But the emphasis is something much more custom made, a beautiful Einfel. I saw the Karen LeDavid in the Tshuva Siman Yud Aleph. He says, a raya min ha-Torah, to the Yesod of the Lachas Ketanis. He doesn't call it Masanas, but he says that Yesod, that even though here is mutter without limit Birkas Hatorah, but when there's a dibur, even someone else's, it's mechuyev in Birkas Hatorah. Why? But listen to an Einfel. What's the makar of Birkas Hatorah? Kishem Hashem Ekra, Havu Goydel Lekeinu. Zok the Chazal, Medrash, Moshe says, I'm going to teach you Torah, but first you make Birkas HaTorah. Kishem Hashem Ekra, and the way the Mashal says, the Heilige Mashal says, where do you see Limud HaTorah in Kishem Hashem Ekra? Because Kol Torah Kula, Shmo Yisrael Kadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is not just a Abaye and Rav, the Heilige Abaye and Rav, but it's Bari Yolam, Bari Yolam. So Kishem Hashem Ekra, I'm going to teach you Torah, and you make a bracha. For the Karen LeDavid, they weren't learning, they were listening, they were attendees, they were listening to a shir. Teretz is listening to shir, is also b'chayim b'chstar min ha-Torah. So that's why Lamaisa, I must tell you, I do know this, Rav Moshe has a big yisoid in the Chelik Aleph Kuf Ayin Gimel. Rav David, Zechon Levrach, asked Rav Moshe an interesting question. Minig Ashkenaz on Rosh Hashanah blow all the tekiyas during Chazar Hashatz. Nusach Svard, most of the Nusach Valkaponim, blows during the Shemay Nesr. So Rav David asked Rav Moshe a very thought-provoking question. Be'emes, doing something during Shemay Nesra is a problem of suffix, l'chala yoysa, a suffix of hefsik. How do I know? Machlokes is Rashi and Tosfos, and Brachas, Chaf and also in Sukkah, if you're allowed to listen to Kedusha during Shemay Nesra. So Rashi says, listen, and then go back to davening. Shemay Kohen is not a hefsik. But if Shemay Kohen works, it's a hefsik. So Rav David is, so if you're talking about Machlokes Rishonim, so why Rosh Hashanah, of all days, Malay Tzacharayin has that suffix of hefsik? So Moshe told him, you're making a mistake. When is it a problem of hefsik? When you need Shemei Ka'oina. By Tkir, there's no din of Shemei Ka'oina, no chiva blowing. So if it's not Bim Koim Oina, there's no Chashash hefsik. And Moshe throws in, another example of that would be Kriyas HaTorah. There's no din of Shemei Ka'oina by Kriyas HaTorah. You have to listen. No din of Oina. So now you'll say, so Bazai, what's my problem of listening before Birkas HaTorah? There's no Shemei Koina. Teretz says, Avada, I know that. But we never said you have to come on to Shemei Koina and make it a hefsik. If there's a factual dibur, the Baal Koir is laning, then it's not just Hira. It's not just Turk and Hira. So that's Mechayiv Birkas HaTorah. So Lamaisa, if he has no other place to daven, no other laning, he has no choice, he has to listen. What he should do is wait, that taka, if probably the right thing would be, if he doesn't have to listen to the laning, he should not listen, go out, find a minion, daven like a mensch, and hope for laning. But, okay, that's never happened to you, so therefore you don't chab. But say, I'm holding before Birkas HaTorah. Do you know what's holding laning? Yeah, I know. The previous Gilgal, that's what he's holding. He's embarrassed, what should he do? See, if it doesn't happen to you, so Bob, you don't realize how embarrassing it is. It's like the guy gets called with an aliyah. The fine says, I can't, I didn't say Birkas HaTorah yet. I mean, that's called mal pnei atzmei b'rabim, right? Okay, good. Let's move on. So this is Lamaisa. Now, I must mention another point. Maybe you want to blind it, B'shas Atcha Godel, Rav Shlomo Kluger, in Elef Chashleim Siman Lamed Hey, he says, this question of Shemei Ka'oina regarding Birkas HaTorah is Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. And I knew exactly where he was going. Rashi holds that you milsh meinas and you hear kedusha. What do? You listen, and you eat shemei kain. In fact, Taisa, if shemei kain, it's a hefsek. So what do we see from that? That Rashi holds, even though shemei kain works, it's not enough of a hefsek. I say Rashi, right? So oy bazoi regarding Birkas Hatorah, that's akula. That even though shemei kain works, but it's not like a dibur. If it's not like a dibur, there's no chiyuv Birkas Hatorah. Azoi zakam shleim bekluga. Now, I'm not going to say who's right, but Lamaisa, most people can say differently. The Karol David's rise and Eisen Raya, and Lina's Daiti, the Pshat is Poshit. Because we're not saying it's Shemei Koine with all the pitch of guess you have to have Shemei Koine with the Briskerov, with the Beis Halevi, and with the Chazanish. We're saying once it's more than just a hero, then you mechim Birkas Hatorah. So not that you have to have Shemei Koine, but once there's a Dibur, and that's Pshat, and that's why the Welt is Taka, Saimach on that, listening to Krishma, listening to Kedusha, is your Yoitza, but it's not a hefsek. But when it comes to our Shaila, Lamais, you have a Dibur. Once there's a Dibur, that is Mechayiv and Birkas Hatorah. Another important, interesting Ha'orah, Shlomo Zalman has, in Halicha Shloim and Purim, Yotes, Ois Ches, the following Ha'orah. Someone came late Purim morning. Okay, that's, we can understand, people come late. But he's living in a little derfel dot, and there's only one minion, and he walks in just in time. They're just about to make the brachas. Lamaisa, he didn't say Birkas Hatorah. What does he do about listening to Megillah before Birkas Hatorah? Wait till they start hacking by Haman. There's no Ben Gavra Lagavra, in Megillah. So Zalman says a novel Yisoid, and he says the famous kasha that the Welt is, Mvaten Talmud Torah from Mikra Megillah. What do you mean Mikra Megillah Bittul Torah? So the Beis Ephraim, the Mat Ephraim, in Shuvas, in Samach Ches, in the beginning, he points to a famous Gemara. The Gemara says, why don't we say Halal on Purim? So, Akati Achashverosh, and Gemara says, Priyasa Zuhi Hilula. He says, Vibal, the Gemara says that the Megillah is a din in Halal. You could have the option of saying the Megillah that I'm listening, B'tchila Vatsoid, is not a din in Limud HaTorah. It's a din in Halal. And that's why he says, maybe in this case, you have no other choice. You're going to miss the beginning of Manashak. Maybe you could have that identity and make that Chiddush. So that's just negate. We once had this Shaila. A person woke up fatugs in the morning, and unfortunately it was a skunk issue. There was a reyach. It was a reyach Rashi Ein Lo Ikab Yekidim because there was no tzoya there, but Lamais it was a reyach Ra, very strong reyach Ra. So the halach, to refresh your memory, by reyach Rashi Ein Lo Ikab, here is mutter, but you can't make a bracha. So, yeah. No. Because the parts can say this. This he said about Reach Ra. So it was unbelievable how it fitted so beautiful. But this is a Reach Ra. I can tell you the Ma'amar comes after. Okay? I'm not saying I'm just going to bring out his point. So this might be a perfect Timtza, that he can't make a bracha, but he's allowed to learn Behir, or allowed to learn. So then we're going to say, even limit bapez mutter. That's the case of mafacha, where someone's mafiach. So to tell him don't learn until the smell dissipates, that's how Gemara. So if we could say this yisoid, that maybe Taki should rely on it, that there's no issa for Birkas Hatorah. And especially he can't say it. So let him learn until the reach dissipates, then I'll make the bracha. Okay, another important question, and this question, Grada, is negay for the rest of the sugya. And that is, what does a person do when he has a real suffix Birkas Hatorah? In other words, either he doesn't know if he says Birkas Hatorah, or it's after Alois Shavuos morning and there's no one around. We Baruch Shem in a yeshiva, someone doesn't, not in a yeshiva, and those shaylos of a suffix Birkas Hatorah. So be'emes, the pashtus of the sugya is, the Gemara says beferish and brachis, Minayin Birkas Hatorah lefanem and Hatorah shenemak yishem Hashem ekra hava goy l'keinu. Ferish Gemara. Comes again the Mishnah Berurah, and Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot and Aleph, and you see his burning Yiras Shamayim, the pachad of Hashem Shamayim Vatola, and he begins with our shayla. Suffix Birkas Hatorah, what do we do? Suffix Shaka Lakula, because it's Suffix Yabon. What's a Birkas Hatorah? So you quote the Shagas Aryeh, the Birkas Hatorah is the Raisa, and you have a suffix, you should make the brachas, and no doubt about it, especially the third bracha. Then he quotes the Shari Tshuva, that some Achayin Mamafakbik, Misafik you shouldn't, but it's hard to say that. Don't forget, the Gemara says in the Darim, like Berach B'Tayr Tchil is a Churban. And he says, after all this, he says, the best thing is get someone else that's making the bracha, be moitzi with Shemei Ka'oina. And don't forget, that's the Chatchila. Shemei Ka'oina is the Chatchila. But he concludes, but if you can't, I'm not sure what to do. Because I found my Mordechai that brings a levush and a oilas tamid, that Birkas Hatorah at the end of the day is only midrabanan. Ubavadei tzarich lizol lechatchila lasis kain. So here we have Mr. Brewer coming out with a suffix, and he's more night. It's a suffix drabanan lahakol. So that's why the minig, certainly minig at yeshivas is on Shavuos morning when we have a suffix, when it comes alois, we get something moitzias. Because I say it, I'll suffix the rice l'chumra. There's like the Mishnah Berurah Pesach. It's a question of a suffix the rice. So this is what the Paiskim say. Now, wait. Lamaisa, when a person was up all night and now it's after alois, now we have a different factor, and that's the Shita Rabbeinu Tam, that the new day is mechayiv even if you didn't sleep. Magen Avram, the Rav, the Aruch HaShulchan, and that's the minig of many Chassidim. They go with the Rav, Magen Avram. That Shavuos morning, no problem. You make a bracha because I'm not a suffix, I'm a vadai. Because the next morning is already a new chiv alois. Okay. Mr. Brewer obviously didn't accept that lechatchila. He said, better get something moitziu, and that's the minig yeshivas. Eilu ve'eilu divrei kim chai. Question: someone's in the hospital and he's waiting for his wife, to have a baby, whatever. He can't run home. He can't go to shul. What do I do? It's after alois. So here lamaisa, again, if he feels like if he's samech on the Rav and the Magen Avram, make a bracha, no problem. If he goes to Mr. Brewer and he will be davening soon, then l'chayra he would be able to learn and rely on the halacha that there's no issa, and here he has no other eitzah. He's stuck. Good. Now, if it's a question, someone asked me, he slept the regular night's sleep, woke up the next morning, came to the shul, had a cup of coffee, about to sit down to the shir, and he chap. I'm not sure if he made Birkas Hatorah. He had an over 50 moment, they call it in English. He doesn't know if he said it. He had a vadei chiv. He might have said it. I guess the coffee was more important than his Birkas Hatorah, so he forgot about the coffee, but the Birkas Hatorah. What does he do? So this has nothing to do with the Beinu Tam. Here he has a vadei chiv. And not a question of alois. The question is, did he discharge his chiv? So the truth, I told him the best thing should have been look around to anybody that comes right away and make Birkas Hatorah for you. And let's say there's nobody, what should I do? So here you can't relazach on the Rav and the Magen Avram because he had a vadei chiv. It wasn't like the new morning's a chiv. So if he really wants, he could take a learn and wait for Avarabba. As I state in the Gemara, Avarabba is yaitza. But Lamaisa, if he really feels guilty, so I can't tell you that he can't rely on many shittas that Birkas Hatorah is the Raisa and Sveika the Raisa l'chumra. Mr. Brewer doesn't go with that, but other person do. So this is something up to the person. Shavuos morning after alois. So let me just remind you, the Adam is learning fleisig, and someone's supposed to come by alois, and he's late. You have 5 boys, one person, 100 people, but it's moments of learning Torah, especially Shavuos morning. Yikarim mipninim. You're supposed to stop learning. So the MS is, for us, this is pashit, that don't stop learning. To close the Gemara, you have to have a Beferish Gemara. Now, Lamaisa, the same is true for those that learn all night and go to sleep. Now, let me tell you, the Metzias, people, they like to daven the regular time, they finish by alois and go to sleep. But the truth is, they have to, something they want to finish learning or saying the Tikkun Leil Shavuos, and it's ready alois. Or the way the halacha really dictates, before you go to sleep, early morning, say Krishma. Because you might miss the Zman. Maybe you can't even go to sleep without Krishma because already Higia Zman. So now the question is, for those that are going to go to sleep in 5 minutes, but they want to chaperine a Krishma and maybe a little bit of the chok that they want to finish, what do I do? To say Birkas Hatorah now, I can't, suffering. To listen to someone else, then when I wake up at 9 o'clock, I can't make a bracha. I much rather say it myself 9 o'clock in the morning, whenever you wake up. So then they are like in the yeshiva, and if there's no other eitzah, then we say that even though it's after alois, you're allowed to learn Mikra Din before Birkas Hatorah. And that's posh. Now, what I should mention is, someone asked Rabbi Yash, this is in a very philosophical seif in Yavakshu, Mipiu, the close Talmud. He said, it's after alois, so Rabbi Yash said, you're allowed to learn until someone comes. So he says, maybe it's better to say Tillim. So Yashav answered, Shavuos daf melan, nish zogen Tillim. Now, he didn't mean chas v'sholem to Mayin Tilim. But he meant to say, listen, I told you, after Alois you're allowed to learn. So why are you looking for eitzes to avoid the issue? It's not a problem. Rabbi Yashiv in the Tshuva Taka wrote, there's no problem. Now, there's another tzad to be makel Shavuos morning, and two gedolim machavan to this, even though it's a chiddush otzim, the Eretz Tzvi, the Kajigulav and Simon Yotest, and the Marshag and Aleph Samach Beis, they both say that really midin ha-mishnah, when does the day really begin, l'gabi Torah dik halachis, Mishnah Megillah, even though it's Alois, but we start by nets. So maybe l'gabi the chiyuv, the new chiyuv of limud ha-Torah by Alois is really wrong, maybe on nets. Okay. But when I found Mosik Midvash Mamish Kipshutai, the Marshag, the same Marshag says, even if you don't like my chiddush, there's nothing wrong with learning after Alois, Shavuos morning. But listen to his cheshbon, you can't question it. He says, B'em Shavuos morning, it's a minute after Alois. Why is there a suffix after Alois more than before Alois? I didn't stop learning, I didn't sleep, so it's no sheina. So why up Alois is the cutoff point? Teretz is like the Benu Tam, there's a new din of a new morning, is a new chiyuv bracha. What is that similar to? No. A regular Birkas Hatorah. Birkas Hatorah we never find is an issa of enjoying your shoes before the bracha. When is there an issa before bracha? Birkas HaMitzvahs, Birkas HaNenin, Birkas Hatorah, put my Amad Bar, we all put on shoes and we get out of bed, open our eyes before the bracha. The teretz is Birkas Hatorah is once a day. So V'Mechateis, after Alois is worse than before Alois. So the Alois, there's no issa. There's a chiyuv. But it's like, just like your chiyuv and shas likal tzarki, you could do it when you want. Which the members of them exakivarin diver pi chacham v'chein. Ma'isa shahaya, someone was just married, true story, and his wife said, I would like to daven v'sikin. Shavuos morning. He said, fine, I'll come, I'm not going to walk in the street alone, I'll pick you up, fine. But he told her nicely, I have to be back for Alois, the one Yid makes brach, I don't want to be stuck with that Birkas Hatorah. Please make sure you're punctual so we could get the yeshiva and I could hear Birkas Hatorah. Okay. Lamaisa, it didn't happen, and he walked in after Birkas Hatorah was said. And he was pretty unhappy, to put it mildly. It was morning. But his wife was alarmed. She goes, you know what? I slept. I'll be moitu Birkas Hatorah. That was his introduction to Shana Rishayna. So the Charish has a Meferish Mechaba. Nashim Mevarch is Birkas Hatorah. Even a Sardi. But the emphasis, as the Goyen writes, and how could it be Nashim make Birkas Hatorah? So the Goyen says the only reason they make Birkas Hatorah is only as an Einer Mitzvah Oisa. Oh, like the Goyen, she can't be Moitzi. Va'oid, and that's what most poskim say, an Isha's Chiyuv Limud Torah is fundamentally different be'eches ubekamis from a man's. They're not allowed to learn most of Torah. They have a small part of the Torah. So how is Yitachin Zok to be halacha that an Ishki might see a man? He first brings such a havmina, but he's doich b'shtei yadayim. There's a different chiyuv be'eches uvakamis. So that didn't work. What they did, I'm not sure, but that didn't work. Last but not least, I'm telling you, Shaila, I'd love to hear from the Olam because this is why I started the whole shir for this question. Someone was in the hospital. His wife was, in labor, and it was getting close to Alois, and he was a ben Torah. There was Kulei Torah. And he knew he's going to have a suffix when it comes to Alois about learning. But what could you do? Typically you could go daven maybe and say Arabah, but he can't leave his wife. And in the hospital there's now yeshiva like on Shavuos morning. And just then, as he's worrying, the Bershom sent Eliyahu Navi, a Yid walked in. So he ran over to the Yid, where are you holding? He goes, holding with what? With I'm sorry, where are you holding Birkas Hatorah? Birkas Hatorah? I just woke up. I have to see someone in the hospital. Great, could you be Moitzi me? But covered goggles. I'll be a great schus. And the Yid said Birkas Hatorah slowly, and the person Mamish was in seventh heaven. The Bershom sent him Eliyahu Navi. Then he looked at his watch. It was already 15 or 20 minutes before Alois. You're laughing. This guy was stuck with it. And he said, was I yoitza? So why not? What do you mean? Bar Chiyuva. But then he started thinking, but I'm not a Bar Chiyuva. L'chol hayoysa, my new chiyuv begins by Alois. He didn't sleep a whole night. So how could he be yoitza with a shemei koina? For him it's Bar Chiyuva. I'm not. So he started thumping. He said, I started thinking maybe I'm an Einer Mitzvah Ba'oisa. I said, no, your wife's an Einer Mitzvah Ba'oisa. You're mechoyev and you're yoitza your chiyuv already. It's like someone makes a bracha, make another one because I'm ein mitzvah. Your bracha is valid until 5:27, whatever time is the alais is. So how could you do that? So now we find up Sanai Yeshayla. See, if you could have a layaway plan in Hilchas Birkas Hatorah, naniach, I didn't find that. And it's a pella. I looked into this, and the Maisa, the tzlach in brachas has this suffix, and he leaves that as a suffix. And Libi Yomi, what's taka the suffix of the tzlach? Because be'emes, this is unlike any other mitzvah that there's a new chiyuv every moment. So even though mitzarechad you have a bracha l'chayra, but vivait is a new chiyuv every moment. Ken zayin, it's enough of a chiyuv because you have a chiyuv that the bracha is chal. But lamaisa, Reb Shlomo Kluger, Kamat the same shayla in Siman Lamed Gimel. He speaks about someone that said Birkas Hatorah before Alois. He said, you're not yotzeh. There's no difference listening or saying. I found other paiskim, Ben Ish Chai says that. But lamaisa, this shayla is not that common. But one thing I will say, and that is whenever a person is making Birkas Hatorah Shavuos morning or on a plane, or any time that he's relying on Alois to be the cutoff point, make sure it's after Alois or after. It's better a minute after Alois than a minute before Alois. Before Alois, you're not yotzeh l'chayra. After Alois, you are yotzeh. Good yom tov to you all. Thank you.
Shane, the ganze Welt would like to give a big Ashikoyach to Rabbi Smishlit for the gewaltige shir. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Rabbi Yakov Zev from AB Plumbing, for sponsoring today's shir. If anybody wants a copy of the shir, I would like to have a flash drive and give me a copy of that.